Oh man, check this out. I just got my photos from 2022 printed out, and getting these prints is becoming like a year-end ritual for me. Living in like the phone photography era, we just don't get prints the way we could or the way we used to, and I don't know, you relive things differently just looking at them like this. So have you ever seen that thing that people on the internet sometimes do where they map out like movie characters or just random things on an axis of morality and orderliness? Like you have someone like the Joker who's like a chaotic evil versus, I don't know, Batman who's like an orderly good, and that's why they're such great foils. You know, right in the center you have like a true neutral. Anyway, all that to say, 2022 goes firmly in that square for chaotic good. The end of 2022 kind of feels like stepping off a roller coaster and being like, I'm not sure I would do it again, but I'm really glad I did that. So what made this year such a chaotic good? Why was surviving it such a feat? We need to go back to the beginning of the year. I'm about to do my annual review video, little thing I do to close out the year, and I'm realizing I am wearing the exact same jacket I wore for this last year. Now it's outdated. Gotta get a 3rd star up there. So everything we did this year needs to be looked at through the lens of dad life and my life as a parent, because that's what this whole thing revolved around. It was around this time last year where we brought home Kai and Juniper as newborns. Reese had just turned 2, and that was beautiful, and it set the stage for the most chaotic and kind of wonderful year of my life. Having 3 kids in 2 years is pretty much as chaotic as it sounds, except I don't know if just hearing that like does justice to like how absolutely full your hands are all the time. There are things that work for when you have 1 kid that don't work when you have 3. And there are things that could even work for having 3 kids that won't work when your 3 kids are all under 3 years old and all close in age, but still at different, you have one at a different developmental stage, so you can't just like batch everything. It's, yeah, one way to play the game on hard. So I went into this year with a good number of questions. First of all, just what would this even look like? How would we survive, keep everyone alive and healthy and safe? Having 3 kids means that like you can't just ask for babysitting the way you might have used to, because 3 kids all doing their own thing is kind of a tall ask. And you've got to find someone who can like figure out the system pretty quickly. I also wondered how I would find room in life for all the other things that are pretty important to me. Travel and creativity and friendships and exploring new things. I'm at this really exciting point career-wise and in terms of my own creativity where I feel like I'm hitting my stride. New opportunities are opening. And when it comes to like travel and opportunities to like go places and explore and tell stories, like the world's kind of opening back up, and I've been really deprived of that the past 2 years. Of course, I know this is a unique time in my life, and the kids have more needs right now, and parenting is my highest priority, but these aren't just hobbies for me. These are life-giving things, and I really believe that like parents are at their best as parents and as people when they can tend to themselves and be whole persons. It's a good example to set for the kids too. I wondered, how can I live my life in a way that doesn't stir up resentment towards this little period we're in? For me, this is another big reason why it still matters to go places, see stuff, make things, do things. See, when you have kids this young and when you're at this stage, it's so easy to keep saying like, okay, this is a great idea for when the kids are older, or yeah, we'll do that once everyone is in school or potty trained or what have you. And there are some things where that just absolutely makes sense, but I think if you're not careful, that can quickly turn into I can't wait until they're all X amount of years old. And I don't want to stir up resentment towards where we are now, because it's beautiful and I won't get it back when it's done. And so, even though it's difficult, I still try and live as whole of a life as I can. Obviously, there's some things that have to wait. Obviously, there's some sacrifices, but you know me. I'm gonna see what I can do. Oh, yeah, here we go. So let's start with that first question. How do we keep everyone alive and healthy and relatively sane? The earliest months were the most limiting. You know, the time period before everyone had really developed a proper sleep cycle and an internal body clock. The key to making it through all that was consistency and structure. It was really important to develop a routine so that everyone's bodies, everyone's internal mechanism knew what to expect. It helps us, adults, parents, function by putting a lot of tasks on autopilot. This all logically makes sense, and it is how we survived, but the thing is, I just do not like routine. I'm not one for structure. You know, what I have a hard time with when it comes to routine is you go through each day, right, kind of running through the same thing. You go through the same routine, the same checklist, and you kind of have your head down just like everyone fed, diapers, naps, fed, diapers, naps. It's hard to be inspired and present and receptive to your surroundings when life is like that. You hit that point, though, and you look up eventually and you realize, wow, months have passed by and I did not take any of that in. Anyway, as someone who's always felt like time passes too quickly, this is kind of my nightmare scenario. It's kind of a big part of the reason why I'm always seeking to do new things and taking in new settings and experiences. That really expands your senses. Time slows down. That was not how my year started off. It was the cycle of meal times and nap times and daycare drop-offs. And when the twins were 5 months old, I had this strong feeling like, wow, that went by very, very fast. And I'm trying to soak it all in. So looking at everything here, we got travel, work, relationships, friendships, creative stuff. Like, these are all big pieces of the life I had always wanted to have. I think the thing I ended up realizing, especially towards the end of the year, is that the big challenge is just fitting it all into a 24-hour day, especially because I'm not great at accounting for sleep. So things started to shift when the twins got a little bit older and we could find ourselves open to a bit more adventure again.
Where are we, Daddy?
We're in Guatemala. Guatemala was not the furthest trip I've ever taken, but with 3 under 3, definitely the most ambitious. But this was the start of a lifelong quest to have the kids' consciousness be appreciative and aware of the world at large and things beyond their immediate borders. We had some meaningful experiences with locals, getting a really good look at their lives. And yeah, international travel with kids, especially 3 of them, is as challenging as it sounds. But it was really important, and it helped get us out of that Groundhog Day funk, and I started to feel more like myself. Shortly after that, I was able to do another trip, surprising my friend with a destination. We went to Toronto.
Lord knows what you're planning on doing next, but yes.
Kind of comes with the surprise trip territory.
Yeah.
I don't know why I always do this. I always think that recording in a coffee shop is going to be great because of the vibes. And then I remember part of the vibes is a lot of conversations and music and machines and noise. And so I went out and got this to go and am behind it now. So as the year progressed, I found myself being able to get back to one of the things I love most, which is storytelling trips. Climate storytelling is like the perfect synergy of what I love doing, what I think I have some skill at, and just a purpose I care a lot about. It was on these trips where I found myself missing the kids the most, and it was actually my first time back on a storytelling trip when I went to Burundi that everyone just happened to get sick right after I left, all at the same time. I think this is just the reality of the life I live. I have so many of the things I've always dreamed of, and the side effect of that is it comes with the challenge of juggling them all. Back in the day, I remember seeing this image online. I think it was like a Tumblr era meme of someone saying, hey, I dream of coming home from work I love back to a life I love. And I think, wow, I kind of have that. But you know, the part you don't hear as much about are all the logistics that go into having that dream scenario. If kids are part of the life you love, then who looks after them while you're doing that work you love, you know? How do you prepare them for when you're gonna be away? How do you stay inspired when that creative energy is sapped? We should talk about this stuff more. So, how did we pull through this ridiculously hectic year? One of my approaches to doing hard things has always been to not dwell too much on how hard it is. Like, if you wanted to run a marathon, one of the worst things you could do is to just tell yourself constantly throughout the race, like, oh, this is so long, this is so far, 26 miles. You just make it to the next mile marker, and then the one after that, and then you keep going. I think though there's also a time where it's a really healthy thing to be open and to just like look back and acknowledge when something you went through was really, really hard. And I think it's kind of why it's just now, as the year's kind of winding down, that the reality of it is actually settling in. Other big thing I learned is you've got to ask for help. This is Francesca in Guatemala. She was a twin mom. She had her babies in the 60s, back when her village had no electricity. She had to like feed those kids overnight by candlelight. I asked her for her advice on raising twins, and this is what she said to me.
Y sobre todo, ¿verdad? A veces uno necesita ayuda de los demás.
I'm especially thankful for my mom. Like, she comes over and helps look after the kids 3 days every week while we're working, and that's a tiring task for me in my 30s. She's like double my age and still doing that. I definitely went into the year with my usual types of goals, things I wanted to read, things I wanted to learn, accomplish, places I wanted to go. I think I completed like 2 of them. I quickly realized this would be a better year for learning how to let go of goals. I normally do really well when I have specific targets I'm steering towards, but for obvious reasons, this year in my life was a bit exceptional. I definitely do miss reading though. I also really miss running. I want to get back into it if I can. So I've been saying this has been a year of chaotic good, and this is gonna sound funny, but the thought really sunk in with me during the baseball playoffs, because I am a huge Phillies fan. We were just hoping to make it into the playoffs by any means. We were not expecting to get very far, and somehow, once we did, everything clicked and we went all the way to the World Series. That's kind of what my year feels like. It wasn't supposed to be this good, but it was. I got to take the kids on international adventures. Vienna and Toronto became 2 of my favorite cities. I got to break new ground with climate storytelling. This took me from mangrove forests to African heartlands. I celebrated a huge milestone. Got to see my 50th state. I got to share my story at Creative Mornings. That was a huge win, years in the making. But it's like the small in-between moments mattered just as much. Times I was playing with a kid or engaged with Deanna in a really long but rewarding conversation. Those times we got to spend with friends and catch up and eat together. I try and pretty regularly remind myself of how many things in life I have that are things I've always hoped for that have now come true. I've always wanted to do creative work that kind of served a higher purpose and contributed to things I really care about, and check, I get to do that for a living. I always wanted to have opportunities to see the world, have regular international adventures, and if I can pull off seeing 4 continents on my first year with 3 kids, something's going right. Now, speaking of kids, I've always wanted a big family. Growing up, I was an only child, but we would have relatives over, or just groups of people, and I always felt like the house was happier when it was full. I never quite imagined my big family would come together quite in the way that it did, but it's happening. The hardest year I ever had was not this past year of having to take care of 3 kids. It was about 4 years ago when we didn't know if we could or ever would have kids. It's been kind of hard, but yeah. What I want to do this year and beyond is quite simple. I just want to get better at soaking it in more. You know, I've worked for these things pretty hard and for a long time. And when you do that, it's so easy to get used to being in a state of looking forward. I want to do a little more looking around. I know that in this upcoming year, that's going to mean leaving some things on the table, or even walking away from some things I would very much like to do. It's going to be hard. I've never been good at that. That's never come easy to me. And even if I do all that, like, space and breathing room is not an easy commodity in my life right now. But I know how valuable that is. I know how important it is. And I want to have that breathing room to enjoy it. And we're going to go for it. Thank you for being here. For real.